Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the ongoing gross and disgusting trend of liberals trying to promote the eating of bugs in our regular diets. Previously we discussed this topic when it came up on our least favorite cable TV show, Adam Ruins Everything. Adam, of course, has been pushing liberal propaganda and their agendas for years. So as part of stepping in line with their recent wave of global warming fear-mongering, promoting the eating of bugs has become part of that in their weird and twisted ways. To follow the logic and assuming they're being honest and straightforward, which they're not, but assuming they are, the pitch is actually pretty simple. If we eat more bugs as our source of protein, less meat will be needed, which means less meat farming will happen, which is bad for the environment. Now, at face value, that's not all bad, but if you actually think about it for a minute and consider the assumptions and ulterior motives at play, it's just another one of their bullshit hoaxes, pretty much. Starting from the global warming bit, which is happening of course, but the effects and the impending doom and end of the world is highly exaggerated here, of course. Freaking wackadoos like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say the whole world is going to end in 12 years because of cow farts, for crying out loud. Are we actually supposed to believe that? So, needless to say, we shouldn't be taking these loons completely seriously. And that's not even getting into the fact that bug eating is gross and the textures are just off and it's really unnecessary when we have so many other better options. Nevertheless, we have a new show and a new group of beta liberals to talk about today who are pushing the same kinds of pro-bug eating ridiculousness that the left and Adam Ruins Everything have been shilling for a while now. In fact, today's host has a lot more in common with Adam than I even noticed at first. Besides the bug pushing, he also wears large framed hipster glasses and, in addition, he overdresses and puts on some of the cringiest, overly styled dress shirts ever. Just like Adam and just like nothing that a real man would ever wear, that's for sure. In addition, this new guy also looks like a discount version of Hank from the Vlogbrothers here on YouTube. And if you hadn't heard, that guy Hank is a big lib too, and he's also a self-hating, white guilt-filled beta wimp as well. So yeah, this new guy who hosts a show called It's Okay to Be Smart, he's not off to a good start. And it's also another bogus show made by the very left-wing and progressive PBS network. So it's no wonder they're dabbling in pro-liberal, pro-bug-eating propaganda. And also, they're trying to ruin our Thanksgiving holiday in the process too. Leftists always love to attack Thanksgiving in any way they can. And usually it's by saying we're racist and that Americans are bad and the Native Americans we dine with on that original holiday were poor innocent victims. Those claims have varying levels of credibility too, but regardless, this new trend to push bug eating into one of our biggest holidays for the country is certainly related here. It's like how they want us to live in those little pod houses now too. The left-wing SJWs want us all working for corporations like Amazon, living in small one-room houses while eating bugs and depending on the government and Big Brother for everything. It's a sad socialist future they have planned for us, so I hope we can keep breaking down that narrative day by day, like what we're doing with today's video. The video in question today comes from the It's Okay to Be Smart YouTube channel, hosted by Joe Hansen. It's called I Ate Worms, trying a Thanksgiving feast made from bugs. This should be gross. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Never been more excited to do anything in my whole life. Okay. And first, that's the way they say to do it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop you right there, buddy. While this might seem like a funny and shocking way to start a video, I'm just getting completely grossed out by it. Let's go ahead and get this image off the screen and just talk like normal people, making a regular video. I've already had more than enough of this guy shoving this giant bug in his mouth. Here he keeps teasing this whole thing for far too long too. And what's the point of all this anyway? It's still too early to tell, but I'm really getting a hipster Vice kind of vibe from this channel. Like they think the bug eating is cool because no one else is doing it, trying to be edgy and different just for the sake of it, and doing so by ingesting the grossest things possible because he's special, right? And the implication here seems to be, oh, but you can eat bugs. But these people never seem to ask the more important question, should we be eating bugs? My answer is no, and so is most of the modern worlds. Only poor and desperate people would be willing to eat bugs like this. I mean, I would rather starve myself or just eat the cheapest thing ever. Bags of ramen noodles come in packs of 4 for $1 at the dollar store. Just grab one can of tuna along with that for another $1 and you'll have enough food for at least 1 or 2 days. No need to go hunting down and eating cockroaches.
Bugs. When I say that word, what comes to mind? Probably not restaurants or your next home cooked meal. When most people think about bugs and food, they think about, I don't know, health code violations. Certainly not eating them. But there are some people out there trying to change that for some really good reasons.
Well, I'm going to have to press X for doubt on that one, Joe. And since you're not going to mention these good reasons for a good long while after this section of the video, I'm also going to call you out for burying the lead here. And yeah, when people think of bugs, they think of health code violations because if a restaurant has bugs, it's always going to be gross and unsanitary and unsafe. Just like if a house had bugs, that would be gross too, and that's why you'd call an exterminator to get rid of them. It's because bugs are gross, they can hurt us, make us sick, and they often carry diseases too. That means our natural inclination to be grossed out and afraid of bugs is actually warranted and totally rational. Really, your unbridled excitement about ingesting this filth, that's what should be considered questionable here. But alas, I can already see where this show is going. This beta nerd is some kind of wannabe smart guy who thinks being a contrarian all the time makes him better than everyone else. It doesn't though. It just makes you look desperate and weird and like you're trying to stand out as different too much, when really you're just the most typical, standard, low IQ kind of leftist there is.
All right, let's try it.
Do it.
And I see what you did with the shrimp. They're arthropods, just like insects. It's awesome.
It's real good.
I love this.
I'm getting some of that zing now.
Yeah, the formic acid is different from citrus. It's a little pop.
None of this is screaming insect to me. It's all used really well, really smartly.
Yeah, that's because you're eating a dish that barely even has any bugs in it. The guy even said it was shrimp with a small amount of ants sprinkled on top. As far as starting things off here, we're not doing too well in my opinion. These guys, which by the way, our lefty host is now being joined by a guy with a ponytail on the right from another wannabe smart liberal show, and also he's got this SJW feminist studies professor next to him on the left, who's supposed to be speaking from authority here. The other thing I notice is that line about the shrimp is the same kind of trick Adam Ruins Everything tried to pull on his bug episode. Adam even tried to say eating lobster is like eating bugs because lobster and shrimp and many insects have similar exoskeletons and they're all arthropods technically, but I think saying that is highly misleading to say the least. Shrimp and lobster are seafood and they're delicious and a good healthy thing to eat for the most part. So when these shows try to compare them to bugs, it's just a sneaky way of trying to make the insect eating look better and comparable to eating fine dining and seafood when it's really not. It's also worth noting that we're going to have to skip through many more minutes of this video because they're bullshitting a lot before we even get to the actual reasoning and justification for eating bugs like this, which I think is rather important and should have been brought up right away. And in my opinion, they're trying not to talk about that, the why behind this, because it's just too stupid, and if they just came out with it right away, people would just turn this video off quickly, so that's why they're trying to church things up first and sneak it in later.
I was in Mexico for a public health project, and I had a taco with chapulines, or grasshoppers, and that was delicious. I started blogging, met bug people, fell in love, and took off from there.
Is there like a scientific reason that people don't eat bugs?
People all over the world do eat bugs. Like, I think from our viewpoint, we think eating bugs is weird, but like, we're actually the odd ones.
You gotta be kidding me. We're not the odd ones, lady. Are you crazy? Places that eat bugs aren't places we should be looking up to for advice anyway. I mean, not to shit on Mexico too hard, but come on. There's a reason they're risking their lives to cross our border illegally every day. People aren't sneaking into Mexico so they can get their hands on grasshopper tacos. No, they're trying to infiltrate the United States so they can get some real food like our steaks, chicken, pizza, hamburgers, you name it, the good stuff. So yeah, other places that eat bugs aren't better off either. The real reason they eat them is because they have nothing else better to eat. They're either poor, desperate, super hungry, or possibly they do have a long tradition of bug eating which still stems from these situations happening in their past. And also, this chick on the right is supposed to be this episode's expert. She's some kind of professor who wrote a book on bugs, but at the same time, she's also just making guesses here and exaggerations, and not really supporting her claims with fact or science at all. Sure, a few other places might eat some bugs sometimes, but let's not pretend every country in the world is doing it, and US here in America, we're the weird ones. That's just anti-American bullshit, which is another typical talking point that comes from liberal bug eaters like this.
People have these innate reactions when they see creepy crawly things. Is that any influence on whether people will choose to eat this stuff?
So the disgust reaction, like the churning stomach, the gag reflex, like it's real, it's a real emotion, but the emotion is learned.
So this is not an innate biological fear of bugs.
Yeah, it's like a neophobia.
So before we ever get to why we should eat bugs and why it's so important, which is what the host said in the very beginning, but now instead we're talking about humans' innate fear and disgust about bugs. And this show and this fake scientists have the gall to pretend it's not even a real thing. It's made up in our heads. And going further, they're trying to explain away the natural human nature and how unnatural it feels as a way to open us up to the possibility of this going forward. And well, I'm obviously not buying any of this crap, and I think think this is just more propaganda tactics wrapped up in this seemingly harmless food and cooking show premise. They're trying to pretend our fear and disgust of bugs isn't natural, and we should actually be okay with it, so that way they can prime us for eating bugs later in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if the rich, champagne socialists and liberals in the deep state behind this, they're just doing this so they can get more of the good meat and food for themselves, and have fine dining and stuff while they make all the poor people eat bugs. That's why they're really pushing all of us to eat more bugs, so they can have more prime ribs, turkeys, and chicken salads for themselves. Lord knows they won't be practicing what they preach here. Just like with other global warming prevention suggestions, the left will never take the advice they give. A famous example of this is with Congresswoman AOC, who preaches even more crazy suggestions, which she also refuses to follow, like using strictly electric cars for driving around, or foregoing air travel completely and using trains. And also, drinking out of a reusable bottle is a must, and these are all things suggested by AOC and other liberals as a way to stop their global warming boogeyman they created, but at the same time, they won't adhere to these suggestions themselves. So if they won't change their travel plans or stop using disposable water bottles, do we really think they will now eat bugs instead of having real food? Come on, I can't believe they think we're this naive.
Mini pecan tarts with crickets.
I can see the crickets.
It's gonna be in my body soon.
It's not a meal without a mealworm. I mean, that's amazing.
Huh. If you didn't tell me that bugs were in it, I wouldn't have known.
Not exactly. What's happening here again is you're eating dishes that barely even have any bugs in them. So this is not really a good look for bug consumption at all, if you think about it. If this was a good food that people should be eating and would taste good, it wouldn't need to be masked with so many other ingredients and flavors, and hidden within some other dishes that are much more tasty. When you eat steak or chicken, for example, or pork, you don't usually need to bury small amounts of that meat into a pie for it to be edible. People often just eat good meats by themselves, and maybe dip them in a little sauce or have a side to go with it, but almost none of these bug dishes even have a noticeable amount of bugs in them, and that's because they don't taste good and people need to mask their flavor with lots of other better tasting, distracting things.
How many people on Earth around the world like regularly consume bugs?
I think the estimate is that at least 1 billion people are eating bugs, like today, right now.
Is that changing?
Okay, wow. First of all, saying you think maybe 1 billion people eat bugs doesn't sound too sure or scientific to me, especially for a so-called expert on a wannabe smart show like this. Next, let's just look at this map and think about what I was saying before. All the places that eat bugs more are pretty shitty, like Mexico, South America, Africa, India, and China. Sure, there are plenty of good places in those areas too, but they're also known to be the poor, more war-torn places with problems and crime and famines and stuff. Now, if you look at the countries not eating bugs on this map, which includes the United States, most of Europe, Russia, and New Zealand, well, you know, those places that don't eat bugs also happen to be some of the best places to live in the world. All of these areas include top places to live in some of the best cities in modern society, and they're on the top places to live lists year after year. For example, here's a short list I googled with some of the best cities to live in the world in 2019, most of them being European countries like Germany, Denmark, and Switzerland, with the others being Canada and New Zealand. And all of these places have the lowest amounts of people eating bugs, according to this show in their graphic. I guess they want us all to eat like the poor, shittier countries as a way to demean us and put us in our places, like we're some kind of prisoners of the state or something, who don't deserve real food, even though our families and our countries and our history got us to where we are in this first world place today. And I'll be damned if we worked this hard and became the best countries in the world in all of history, also we could just end up eating bugs off the street anyways. Please, I won't have it that way.
It starts painting bugs as savage and primitive, and that goes all the way back to a colonial history. So Columbus, when he encountered people, they were eating bugs. These people were painted as primitive and savage and animal-like. And so then the entire European continent's like, well, I don't want to be thought of as primitive or savage. And so then eating bugs was just was disgusting, taboo.
So now we got some random bashing of Christopher Columbus in here. Another classic left-wing talking point. They just love shitting on American history, and that goes all the way back to attacking Columbus for founding this continent for the Europeans back in 1492. And the way this chick says the natives were painted as savages, well, she's not exactly wrong. They were described that way because that's the way they were. Columbus wasn't making shit up. When he came to the Americas, the natives weren't using iPhones and discussing global politics on their YouTube channels. No, the Native Americans were living in huts scattered across the lands, unconnected, and fighting with each other non-stop, which usually resulted in some heinous sex crimes and even scalping of people's heads. And they weren't eating 4-course meals at the Palms Hotel night after night either. No, Native Americans were barely surviving in some cases, living off the land, but also dying and having troubles with it too. Nothing wrong with the natives either. I'm not trying to bash them too hard, but I'm also not going to pretend they were this advanced, progressive, perfect society when we got here either, which seems to be the MO of this show and others with the same left-wing spin, like Adam Ruins Everything Again, who had an episode with very similar anti-Columbus talking points too.
But the two main ones that we always hit on are emissions and water use.
The same amount of crickets, the same amount of beef, it takes 1,000 or so times less water to make the crickets as the beef.
Yeah.
Okay, but emissions are a huge part of that too. We know that agricultural emissions are like a big part of our greenhouse gas problem.
You can trace emissions to a lot of different things, from food transport, and insects are great for local agriculture.
So here, 12 minutes in, and we finally get to a hint of why this bug eating is supposedly a good thing to them, and why they think it's important. And of course, as suspected, they're going with the pro-environment sustainability excuse. But I'm not buying this all, certainly. First of all, as stated earlier, it's pretty clear the global warming situation is often overblown by SJWs like this, and they use it as a way to get their way and try and boss people around too. Second, I'm not sure I trust these claims in this graphic either, and they're certainly not being presented honestly or without bias. Like, sure, growing a cow could take more work than growing a cricket. I mean, think about it. Cows are like 1,000,000 times bigger than crickets. But since cows not only taste better and they also produce a lot more food and protein, well, it's totally worth raising them, and that's why it's part of our society, for good reason. Same goes for pigs and chickens too. They are worlds bigger and much better than growing crickets, like we're some kind of losers in a third world country. So I'm not sure if this graphic and study is adjusted for the size differences or not. It's really not clear here at all, so in that case, I think it's okay to assume the worst. This is all misleading liberal propaganda garbage, and it really needs to stop. In the end, the left tried to both ruin Thanksgiving this year and make us eat bugs too, once again. But as I've said time and time again, screw that. I love this country and I love our holidays and traditions just the way they are. No way I'm going to be swapping out my Thanksgiving turkey so we can eat cockroaches instead, and I hope you guys don't either, and no one should get swept into this left-wing silliness at all. What do you guys think? Should people be eating bugs? And why does the left always attack Thanksgiving every single year? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.